All right, good evening. You are the true Hardy. You've stuck around. This is the last session of the evening. We'll try to make it relatively quick. We know people, there's booze next door and families to go see. So we'll try to march through this pretty quick. Steve and I have known each other for about 15 years. We've done several projects together for a variety of customers. Steve, I was just thinking in that time I've been with 3 companies, you've been with 4. So it's we've kept in touch and we've done some good work together. Right there on the screen, we're just starting off with a screenshot from the Port of Long Beach, California, which we thought was impressive. But then we heard earlier today that actually the Port of New York and Elizabeth has actually got more traffic. So next time we'll use a New York picture. Quickly, we'll run through some introductions, talk about the state of the industry. We really want to focus on multi-criteria decision-making, which we feel is really the way to do asset management going forward. So you're getting your most bang for the buck. We want to talk about some examples of projects that we've done and some of the trends that we're seeing in the industry. So quickly, I'm with Stellar Services. We're an IT firm based in Manhattan here, down on 36th Street. We have nationwide coverage and we're an MBE entity. We work with most of the big capital construction entities. The majority of the organizations that we're here today, we've done something with or are working with now. So you are our people. Oh, and I'm sorry, Steve?
And I'm Steve Famularo. I'm the East leader for the WSP's Maritime group. I've got about 26 years of experience extensively and exclusively in the fields of marine and waterfront engineering.
Great, thanks. So quickly, putting the one slide about Stellar. Like I said, we're about 160 people based here in New York City, but we have offices across the country. We do a wide variety of IT tasks, including asset management, systems integration, custom application development. Steve?
And WSP is a professional services firm, and in 2014, they acquired Parsons Brinckerhoff, which is about one of the key reasons with their presence in New York City. Over 60,000 employees worldwide and over 16,000 in the US, and all ranges of civil advisory services, engineering support for a wide range of consulting services.
Great, thanks. So the organizations the 2 of us have worked with, these are 3 representative organizations. We both started working with the New York City Economic Development Corporation, which, for those that don't know, they manage all 520 miles of waterfront in New York City for the city. They inspect it, they execute work orders, they manage the assets. We've also both worked with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and MARAD, which is part of US DOT. It's the most recent project we've done together. We've also worked with a couple of commercial entities, but these are probably the most significant. So quickly, the state of the industry. There's about 360 ports in the US that have commercial cargo going through. Directly or indirectly, there's about 30 million jobs supported. And it's roughly 26% of GDP is associated with ports. Pretty significant. And so quickly, we pulled this quote there from an industry periodical. They said port owners and operators should utilize asset management to prioritize limited funding and pinpoint needed repairs. That's what Steve and I do. We go in and implement asset management solutions. So quickly, this is a photo. We've done in our tenure multiple harbor surveys where we take a boat or canoe or on foot and we walk the entire waterfront of New York City and take photography and then map it and add the tabular information. These are some failed piles on Staten Island. This pier really should be closed. We've seen more shocking stuff in our surveys. So it's quite a harbor out there. Quickly, from the latest ASCE scorecard, you can see here the condition ratings for waterfront facilities. This is waterfront specific. Only about 9%, this is nationwide, of waterfront assets are considered good or very good condition. So we've definitely got some issues. We are luckily seeing some standards emerge. In the last decade, there's a British organization called the Institute of Asset Management. Got started. It now has chapters here in the US. It's certifying individuals and organizations in asset management, the industry. They also provide a series of standards, but there's a more rigorous set of standards from the International Standards Organization. They have their 55,000 series that includes how you can structure, execute a program. It's really best practices, and it's also got a recommended high-level data model built in. So we're trying to adhere to these and make use of them whenever we can, and we're excited that the industry is getting more organized. So quickly, today we've heard state of good repair over and over again. That's definitely the issue, and that's the focus with waterfront asset management too. We know that FTA originated the term, but it's in general use industry-wide at this point. It's really where you've got an asset is able to operate at a full level of performance. People are probably familiar with the asset life cycle. You identify the need, you procure, you construct and implement, commission, you maintain it, especially to fight off deterioration. You monitor that condition over time and do more maintenance as needed. And when it's reached its life cycle, you decommission and replace. So the standard functions that we implement for our customers, upfront, you've got to do an inventory of what there is. Then you're going to get routine maintenance going. You want to inspect to make sure that you truly understand the conditions of the infrastructure. We've got, like in New York City, we put in a custom asset management system for the waterfront. They've done over 4,000 inspections, for example. And those are done by a mix of contractor staff and city personnel. They all use the same system. The system we put in is actually used by over 100 different organizations. And when you get that kind of collaboration and central data management, reporting, prioritization, you've really got a powerful tool so you can really effectively manage your assets. For day-to-day activities, you're executing work orders. For bigger issues like those failed piles on that Staten Island pier, you want to initiate capital projects to replace it or demolish it. So quick benefits. This is motherhood and apple pie. You want to implement good business practices. You want to be in compliance with all of those regulators at the state, the feds, elsewhere. You want to have a reliable system that's safe and your liability is reduced. You want to realize cost savings eventually. Sometimes that can take a while. And more, we heard today a lot about the IIJA funding that's coming down from Washington, awful lot of it. And what we're seeing is with all these grant applications now, the feds are expecting that you're reporting back on the state of your assets. It's basically becoming a required component. And the more detail you can give, the more likely you are to get additional funding. So it's really, it's helping you pay the bills. Best practices, when you're maintaining waterfront assets, you often don't have enough money to do everything you want to do. It's a matter of prioritizing. And you need to right size it so you do the most with what you've got, and you have to prioritize what you're doing. And over time, it's going to be a long-term solution. You want to use a phased approach. And in terms of how you prioritize, Steve's going to take us into that area.
Thanks, Jim. So as he said, with all of these recommendations and all of these different projects you have, you're going to have a very limited budget to work with. And not everything in that program is going to fit into what you need to accomplish. So the first thing we'll talk about is a concept called multi-criteria decision-making. And really, this is just about making good choices and good decisions around the money and availability that you have based upon the project itself. And we all deal with this on a regular basis in our day-to-day lives. If you're deciding on something simple like where to go to a restaurant, or something more complex about buying cars or a house. You're taking into a whole bunch of different criteria that you're using to make the decision. Usually you don't pull out Excel or a spreadsheet or anything like that. You use your head and you make a decision based upon that. But it gets a lot more complicated when you have thousands of projects, or maybe just a small number of billion-dollar projects or multi-million-dollar ones to make decisions on. So there is a process that can be utilized to make educated decisions around where to allocate that funding. And the key in this overall is that you are taking into account all of those criteria and the importance of them, and then feeding it into an algorithm that can be complex or simple in making those overall choices. This whole process is based in economics, in mathematics, and surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, in the fields of psychology as well. A lot of times people look at the process and go, I know what to do. I know where the money goes. That's why I'm getting paid to do this. Or they look and say, you know, this whole asset management thing or this MCDM or whatever you want to call it is too time consuming. I don't have the time to do this overall. It's maybe esoteric. It's something that I just don't understand. And finally, you might come across, which is really the most common, I don't have the resources. I don't have the time. I don't have any more consultants to hire to do this. I'm just going to pick some projects to do, or I'm going to pick some overall. And that's not the best use of a very limited budget that you have. So as a result, there's really 4 simple components to this process. First is you have to have a list of projects or alternatives that you're considering. The next is criteria. What are some of the things that you value that you're going to use as a decision-making, as part of your processes to make the decision? What do you care about the most when you're evaluating all these alternatives? The next one is the weights. How are they compared to one another? What are the relative merits of one versus the other? Is one 3 or 4 times more important to you? Is it 20% more important to you? How do they kind of scale against each other? And then lastly, you need the people. Because the inputs to this, well, maybe in the future it could be AI. Right now, it is about people putting the inputs into this. And it could be one person who goes through this, or it could be a team of people. It could be a wide variety, and you're pulling this all together. Some of these different value measures, these different scoring metrics that you can come up with, they can be based upon standard industry metrics. They could be cargo throughput or return on investment. They can be subjective. They can be a yes, no. And we were talking about this earlier. Rebecca was bringing it up. Is this project have a resiliency component? Is there environmental justice to it? It could be an on or off switch, or it could be what is the relative degree to which we're contributing to those overall. And lastly, they could be relative. You could be scoring various projects relative to the best project or to the worst project overall. These are just 3 examples. There's a lot more to them overall. You're never gonna be able to see what I have up there, but we put this together for port projects overall. And in the list up there really hits on 3 key things: state of good repair, economic benefits, and risk management. So what you'll do is you'll look and you'll develop the different criteria that matter to you at the port or whatever your project is, and you'll assign it the relative weights. This flow chart here is that you're first going to pick your projects, then you're going to assess the value measures. You're going to go through and either question people, or you're going to get the data on it, and you're going to get a score for each of them that when you put that data in comes out to be 0 to 100. From that, you're going to apply the relative weights. Effectively, you're going to multiply the weights times the scores, and you're going to get a ranking overall. I'm simplifying the process greatly. It may sound very intuitive, and you can actually do this in Excel, as we have done with this particular one. But in the end, what you're doing is you're getting a series of answers through whatever process you choose, complex, more than I've just described here, or just the exact model that I talked about. And this here is an example, and it's nice and colorful, but what effectively each of those different bars is a different project. And the score of that project is the sum of all the weighted scores on all those different metrics there. You can see there's about 20 at the bottom there, and that's what this project that Jim and I had worked on determined what the various port-related ones were. There was a lot of different inputs, especially along the lines of risk management as well. And when all of those are scored and you get it, it may look like, oh, well, the highest ones are where I need to spend the money. But that's not how it would work if you're looking at a wide variety of potential costs. So what you have to do is you have to look at score per dollar. And what you can actually do is you can rank the projects on their relative merits and see where's the best efficiency you're generating. This particular graph, a little hard to see again from whatever distance you are from the screen today. But effectively, you would look along the bottom, find the dollar value you have on your budget, move up the chart, and anything to the left of the bar is going to be what the system says is where you should be prioritizing the funding of your money. So there's a lot of ways that this can be done overall. I was, again, showing you something I think is a relatively straightforward way. There are so many different algorithms around multi-criteria decision-making, but it is really a fundamental part of asset management, and it's a fundamental part of budgeting on what we all know is a very difficult time when you're dealing with a set of funding and a lot of competing projects and alternatives. So on the last one, which is actually the title of our presentation today, some examples on the waterfront side of things. Jim and I are going to talk very briefly about two quick examples just to highlight some of the different alternatives out there. And then we'll talk about some of the takeaways here. So the first is the EDC system, which abbreviation is WFMMS, which is the Waterfront Facilities Maintenance Management System. And that algorithm has been around for a long time. This software that we developed is a web-based system that's based on very rudimentary SQL Server and ArcGIS technologies. But the key here is that it's got a map view, so you can see these things visually, and it's got this data management dashboard where you can look at all of this information, and everybody, as Jim said before, there's over 100 different agencies that are utilizing this, can get access to it. It's all based upon very standard protocols for inspection and for hierarchy of components as well. Just a quick visual of it. This is just an interface view, and you can see this is the GIS view where you can zoom in and get to the various assets and see what the different structure types are and their condition. And then if you click on one of them, you'll get the key data. This is really just tabular data, but organized in a very logical fashion. And you can drill down through it. When was the last inspected? What are my recommendations to spend? And from all those recommendations, when they're summed up into one big lump report, you can go through and use whatever algorithm you are going to make decisions on. And where Jim and I actually spent some time discussing this algorithm is on a project we worked on together for the Maritime Administration. And this was to create what's called the Waterfront Asset Management Tool. And the key here was that ports are not doing, in general across the country, those 300 plus are not making the best use of the funding that is coming in the door there. So USDOT MARAD wanted to help prioritize a plan and develop an algorithm for them to make better decisions around. The first part of our project was very much based on the in-water work. And the reason was their review, Maritime Administration did a review of various ports and determined that deferred maintenance was all too common and is one of the biggest concerns within the port infrastructure. I'm sure ports are not the only one who have deferred maintenance problems, but this was the study the Maritime Administration did with them about their biggest concerns. They don't do any risk-based decision-making. What are some of the consequences if this port goes down and I lose my economic throughput? What does that mean risk-wise to the community, to the state, to the nation? Not a lot of that was being brought in. And they do have concerns around things that just tend to be very basic: weather, deferred maintenance, deterioration. So this protocol, this project was to help make some better decisions. And the goal was to maximize the financial benefits, maximize the state of good repair, and minimize risk. So we helped with applying a lot of those principles of multi-criteria decision-making. We developed a series of different user interface mock-ups that they would use in moving on to future stages of the project. And we're looking forward to seeing if they proceed to those next stages. All of this was about trying to develop the framework so that the data could be input to use better decision-making and risk management tools in their processes for ports that may not be the Port of New York. They may be Port Hueneme, which is a small port, which is very valuable, but probably doesn't have the time to dedicate to this. And maybe they could use a tool that the government is issuing and helping to distribute. So we covered the core topics we wanted to today for you. Thank you for sticking around. We'll get to the basic trends here. And that is that we're seeing that asset management programs, maybe compared to 20 years, robust systems are really becoming the norm. And a lot of that comes from the fact that there's so much more advancement in technology in your hand and software as a service and commercial off-the-shelf systems that make asset management more within the reach of ports at various levels. You don't have to implement Maximo, which is like the top of the line. You can go at different levels of service and you can find different providers. Jim, you want to hit on the other one you were talking about?
Sure. I'll talk loud because I'm not sure how to use the mic, but real-time data access and flows, when we put in systems now, we've got people in the field who are doing data entry in real time. We see it back at the office immediately. We're using the cloud. You can make them very quick, accurate, timely decision-making. This is becoming the norm. Flows across systems. You heard from some of the speakers earlier that basically integrating systems now has become easier than ever. And we're quickly able to move data across the various systems behind asset management so that you can get a complete picture of the waterfront. Steve and I were first tasked when we started working for Dan Zarilli, who was deputy mayor in New York City back in 2007. He said, when I come in the morning, I want to log in and I want to see the state of my infrastructure. And we gave him a dashboard. And some of those reports that he was getting, some of the graphs, some of the metrics, were time delayed by a day, a week, a month. That's not true anymore. That stuff can be real time. Dan was a tough taskmaster. We miss him. But he's behind a lot of the work we've done here. Third one?
Third one, technology as an enabler. So right now, the way that we can utilize it is to help support the processes and make them more valuable in the way they're being done, as opposed to the past where maybe you were relying on the technology as the process. Well, now the processes are advanced that the technology we're applying helps to just make these smart decisions much more applicable to the work that you're doing.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Fourth bullet there. Technology lock. That's where you buy a vendor's product and you can't migrate off of it. You're stuck with it forever. That's becoming less of an issue. Steve and I have found that basically off-the-shelf asset management systems don't work well for the waterfront. They're made for more traditional assets. So we generally deliver custom solutions. But whether the products you choose these days, it's less important because systems can talk to each other, especially if you're deploying on the cloud and you've got the data flows automatically that you can set up. Technology lock is really not an issue anymore.
And then lastly, I was kind of joking about it before, but it's honestly starting to get scary where we are right now with AI. But maybe in the past you needed people to go through to make the right, assessing the criteria, but maybe in the future you won't. And AI and machine learning are going to come into play to help you make better decisions. The last thing you want to do is get all this data through a major, awesome asset management program, inspect, send people out there, get conditions, and then take a year to go through all that data when things are changing. And maybe these types of technologies will advance so that they can be part of the flow in getting to those answers quickly. And we already all seeing it. We've definitely seen that software as a service for asset management is promoting the use of machine learning and asset and AI in its application. Maybe not for MCDA, but in the way that it's helping you to be more efficient with the use of it. So we tried to be, Waterfront is our background, but we tried to give you some kind of context here that was broad because we know that there's a lot of industries being represented here today, but that's really where our experience comes from. And we appreciate you sticking around today, and that is the end of our presentation, and we're here if you have any questions.